everybody, Sean here with Some Dude in Texas, and welcome back. If you're new to the channel, hey, thanks for stopping by. So this episode is going to be one part of a multi-part series I'm going to be doing, where I'm going to be showing my Christian metal collection. Not the more mainstream common stuff that you've heard, but more the heavier stuff, the thrash and the death metal. I'm going to be mainly talking about the pioneers of that thrash and death metal genre. So stay tuned. All right, so like I said, I'm going to be talking about I don't know if you want to call it underground or what, but more of the heavier stuff, the thrash metal and the death metal of the Christian metal genre. And these bands I'm going to be talking about, are kind of considered the pioneers, right? There were other bands, other bands that were playing heavier stuff, but not in that Christian genre, right? So these were kind of, groundbreaking bands, that were, some of them were kind of controversial, some of them were, more kind of, I don't know, more kind of accepted, even though that they were heavier. But anyway, we'll get started. With like the thrash genre, especially in that Bay Area, you have what's considered the big four, Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax, even though they're not that Bay Area. But, they were kind of the originators of that early, old school thrash metal, right? Well, with the Christian, metal, the thrash death metal genre, to me, you got the big four would be Vengeance, or, they ended up changing the name, Vengeance Rising, Deliverance, Believer, and Mortification. And then later on, there were other bands too, like Living Sacrifice and Tourniquet. Tourniquet was kind of thrash, but more kind of just a real heavy, faster paced metal, kind of like a King Diamond. But to me, like the big four would be, Vengeance, Deliverance, Believer, and Mortification. So we're going to start this, series off. First, collection I'm going to show is my Vengeance or Vengeance Rising collection. So when they originally came out, I think they came out like in, I don't know, 86, 87, something like that. Out of California, they went by the name of Vengeance. Well, after their first album, I think there was another band out of Europe or somewhere that had the name Vengeance, so they ended up changing it and adding Rising to it. But anyway, their first album, to me, it was, when this first came out, man, I think I was about 14, 15 years old, and I hadn't heard anything, quite like this. And it was, just kind of punched you in the face, especially you're going to see the album cover if you haven't seen it. It's, it's kind of, whoa, it's kind of gruesome, especially, seeing it, where it was sold, at Christian bookstores and music stores. But anyway, their first album, Human Sacrifice, I think is, when you talk about Christian metal, this has to go down as a classic, as one of the, the top five. Back of it. But these guys were, I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain. Like I said, I'd never heard anything like this at the time. The music-wise, I don't know, you can kind of hear a hint or a touch of maybe some early Metallica off the Kill 'Em All album, kind of that style. The guitar sound was just, real loud, cranked up Marshalls, and it's just real dirty and gritty. It's a good mix on the album, kind of raw, but I think where they really kind of stood out was the vocals, right? Roger Martinez, who was the singer, he had, some vocals that I'd never heard of at the time. Kind of, I guess you can call them thrash, but they're real growly and kind of, that raspy kind of sound to it. And to mix with the music was really kind of, like I said, kind of, that old Metallica, but kind of had some bluesy flair to it as well. Just heavy, fast, but with some groove. So the two really kind of mixed well. You heard these real heavy vocals and just kind of over the top with some just killer rhythm stuff, between the guitars, the bass, and even the drums. Just good stuff. But this was just, I don't know, like I said, this was an album that when it hit that Christian scene, it was really kind of punched everybody in the face. And the band alone was kind of, later on kind of, controversy. I'm not going to go into all of that. That's not my story to tell, but just mainly just talk about my collection here and the music. But songs, I think, to me, one thing that kind of stood out was the lyrics. I usually don't listen to lyrics, right? I kind of always see the vocals as a another instrument, right? I want to listen to the vocals, hear how they say the words, and sing and growl, scream, whatever. But the lyrics on this were, they're cheesy, right? At times, but when you're listening to this type of music, thrash death metal, you normally don't go to it to listen to the lyrical content, or even the thought behind it or whatever. But some of the, like I said, they're Christian lyrics, but some of them are pretty clever, right? And Roger Martinez was pretty good at writing some of these lyrics. But some of the songs on here, Human Sacrifice, Burn, Mulligan Stew, Receive Him, I Love Hate and Evil, and Fatal Delay. That's the first side. And you can kind of see, there's definitely some Christian, meaning behind some of these, song titles and everything. But just, the music was just killer, man. I think my favorite song on this first side has got to be Mulligan Stew, right? It's basically talking about going out and partying, drinking and doing drugs, smoking and all of that. And the Mulligan Stew basically meaning, puking and throwing up after all that partying and everything. But just good music to it. And, like I said, the lyrics were pretty clever, I think. And then on the second side, you got White Throne, Salvation, From the Dead, Accession, He is God, and then Fill This Place with Blood, and then Beheaded. Some of that stuff's pretty kind of heavy and gruesome sounding, right? Some of the lyrics. But, of course, they're going to have that biblical meaning behind it. But I think, just this B-side or side 2 is so strong as well. I mean, the guitar work and just the rhythms on this is just killer. Larry Fark is the lead guitar player on it. This guy right here. I just think he is so underrated. And even Doug Tom, I think that's his name, the other guitar player, they just worked great together. Like I said, man, they just had this cranked Marshall, just gritty, dirty sound, tone to it. But Larry's solos on this stuff, man, was so just, I don't know, man, the tone on it, the feel, really kind of bluesy sound to it. And you can kind of compare it to maybe, Kirk Hammett, because he uses a lot of wah. But, there's a lot of feel on it. Don't get me wrong, he does some fast stuff, kind of shred a little bit, but he puts a lot of slow bends and just some feel to it. Just killer stuff, man. If you haven't heard, this album, definitely, I think this is a good one to start with if you want to kind of go into this genre here. But Vengeance, Human Sacrifice, their first album, just killer. All right, their second album. Now, unfortunately, this was the last album they did with that lineup, with the original 4 guys. But this is when they changed the name. Vengeance Rising, Once Dead. Pretty cool. Like I said, look, gruesome, zombies coming out. Once again, kind of controversial for, to be sold in a Christian bookstore or record store. You had the adults coming in there kind of, giving you the stink eye looking at it like, what is this stuff? But anyway, here's their insert. Pretty cool. The album cover again. And then here's like some behind the scenes, I guess, where they were doing the makeup and stuff for the album cover. Pretty cool. But this kind of goes right along with the first one, man. That same style, just that speed, thrash, just raw, gritty, thrash metal. First song on side 1's Warfare, and then Can't Get Out, Cut into Pieces, Frontal Lobotomy, Herod's Violent Death, and The Whipping Post. I think my favorite song on this is on the first side is going to be the Can't Get Out. Once again, kind of just talking about struggles with drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. Listen to the lyrics, man. They're pretty clever and kind of funny stuff in there as well. Once again, just like I said, follows the first album, just that raw, good mix, but raw, just kind of thrash metal with that, little touch of, that, I don't know, Roger's vocals can kind of, these first 2 albums kind of go along, maybe a little bit of death metal-ish. And then on the second side, you got to Arise, and then they did an awesome cover of Deep Purple Space Truckin'. It just fits the album good and fits their style, right? I guess that's kind of a good way to put their rhythm or music-wise on it. Think of kind of Deep Purple, just kind of that groovy heaviness, but kicked up a notch or two, or probably 10. Just heavy, kind of that groovy blues, but thrashy. And then after that was Out of the Will and The Wrath to Come, Into the Abyss, Among the Dead, and Interruption. Once again, great album. Unfortunately, it was their final one. I'm not going to go into details of what happened. Like I said, not my story, but pretty much this was the final one with the original lineup. And you can get these over at, I think, Overstock, something like that. These were reissues put out on Rocks Records, but originally was on Frontline Records, a Christian label. All right, now the next albums I got here, I've got on cassette. I didn't get them on vinyl, but these are actually, I think, original pressings on Intense Records. But like I said, that the last album was it with the original lineup. They put out 2 more albums, but it was the only original member was Roger Martinez, the singer. Everybody else was replaced. So 2 new guitar players, bass player, and drummer. And you can tell there's a difference. But all right, this next one is Destruction Comes. Now this was kind of a controversial album as well. So originally, when it came out, I don't know if you can see that, but there was a sticker where my finger was, right? Because apparently the Christian bookstores and everything they didn't like that too much. Well, all it is that, right? Not too bad, just a drawing, right? But I remember I had the original tape of this, and it had the sticker on the outside, so you couldn't see it. But this was a lot different. You pretty much, there you go, you got Roger right there on the back. And I think he kind of took over the writing at this point. So it was not bad, but you could definitely tell the difference. Totally different direction. Went more death metal-ish on this. His vocals were a lot more lower, and the rhythms were kind of, just, I don't want to say simple, but just more straightforward. And he had hired some other people, had some other guys in the band, so you can definitely tell that there was a difference. Not bad, but I just not the same as the first 2. But it was Destruction Comes. There it is. And then the last one here, this was the last studio album, Released Upon the Earth. Once again, this was more death metal, more heavier. So I think Roger was still kind of doing the main writing on this. Like I said, he had different guys on this one too than the last one, so it was kind of becoming that revolving door. But still pretty good. I actually, unfortunately, I never got to see them live with the original lineup, but I did see them on this tour, and it was pretty cool. I remember they came, they came out, and if I remember correctly, I think there were like giant skulls on the stage, right? And then they all came out with these robes, these druid-looking guys. And if you look, I think there's a video off this album. I can't remember. It might have been Released Upon the Earth, the title track. But they were wearing that stuff. They came out on stage and, dressed up like that. And it was kind of crazy. But it was a pretty good show. Like I said, unfortunately, I never got to see the original lineup. But Released Upon the Earth, kind of along the lines of Destruction Come, just kind of more kind of straightforward, heavier, just kind of think of that, original kind of old school kind of death metal-ish to it. Nothing real intricate. I wouldn't say obituary, but kind of just more straightforward riffs. And then his vocals were, lower than the first 2 albums. But, you can check this one out as well. Released Upon the Earth, Vengeance Rising. And then they did put out like an anthology. It was kind of a greatest hits, after that one. But Released Upon the Earth, that was the last studio album, and that's it, man. They put out 4 albums. Like I said, the first 2 were just, to me, classics, man. They just really, well, the camera just shook. Here, my dog's in here, and he just stretched out and hit the camera, so sorry about that. But those first 2 were just classics, right? They really kind of kicked you in the face, especially if you were listening to that, kind of Christian genre at that time. You'd never heard anything about it, so it's pretty cool. I do know a couple years ago, maybe even more than a couple years ago, a few years ago, the original 4 rhythm sections, right? Larry, Doug, and then man, I can't remember the bass player's name, but and the drummer's name, but they got together. So the original 4 rhythm sections of the band, they did get together, and I think they played a show or two, and they got another guy singing. Sounded pretty good. It was really cool kind of seeing them, you know, up on stage again. You know, the videos are out on YouTube, and that's where I checked it out. But it would be cool to kind of see them maybe put, you know, one more album out, see if they can put something out around that genre, maybe get, you know, the guy that they get sing for them before, or somebody else that can, you know, kind of fit that bill. But Vengeance Rising, or Vengeance, they always kind of had a spot, you know, for me. It was, you know, one of the first heavy, you know, bands that I ever heard, and it just kind of, you know, like I said, it stuck with me. And I think, especially the first 2 albums, I really think they kind of, they, you know, they held their own, right? And kind of did good with time, you know, even 25, 30, or 30 years later, it still holds up, just killer stuff. So, but that's it, man. And like I said, that'll be this episode. I'll do some other parts where I'm talking about some of the other bands, Deliverance and Believer and stuff like that. Got some stories with that as well, and even Mortification. But like I said, if you haven't, you know, if you've always thought, I don't want to, you know, dip into that, you know, God, I can't even talk today. Give it a chance, right? You know, it's pretty good stuff. You know, they're great musicians, especially, you know, these bands I want to be talking about. Just put out some killer stuff. But Vengeance Rising, definitely one of the big 4 of that Christian, you know, thrash death metal. So if you haven't checked them out, definitely do, man. So, hey, that wraps it up for this episode. And I, you know, appreciate y'all watching. You know, be sure to leave me some comments. Let me know what y'all think about Vengeance Rising. You know, any stories y'all have, if you got to see them live, or what your thoughts are. If you've never heard them and then you are checking them out, let me know what you think. You know, like I said, leave those comments. Also, if you like what you're seeing, you know, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. And once again, hey, thanks for watching. And until next time, y'all take care.
Y'all come back now, you hear?